Today we're going to talk about rent-to-own deals. Rent-to-own are not very common, but if you get them, now you're going to know how to do them. A rent-to-own is when someone cannot qualify for a mortgage, but they still want to buy a property. So they approach the seller, and the seller is willing to rent the property to them for a period of time and then selling it to them. But before all this happens, there has to be agreements between the renter/buyer and the seller/landlord. The first one is they have to agree on a sales price beforehand. Secondly, most likely the seller is going to require a bigger deposit to give him this option. $5,000, $10,000, $20,000. Third, out of the monthly rent, a percentage of that goes towards principal. And fourth, the option is how long are you going to give me between my rental agreement until I can buy the property, because the option expires. So there are two documents that you have to produce when you do a rent-to-own. One is an agreement of sale. So let's say the rent-to-own option is for 5 years. So in the agreement of sale, you put in how much deposit the seller is holding on that agreement and when is the settlement. So let's say it's 5 years from now. The settlement date on the agreement of sale has to be March 10th, 2028. And then on the agreement of sale, you put in who's the buyer, who's the seller, which is the tenant and the landlord, the amount of, what is the purchase price, how much deposit, and then make sure on the agreement of sale you put in who's holding the deposit. In this case, most likely is going to be the seller. What is the settlement date? And then on the type of financing, you put the type of financing that the person who's renting is gonna use in the future. No inspections, because I assume there are not gonna be any inspections, and that's it. Then the second document that goes hand in hand with the agreement of sale is the lease agreement. Because remember, they're also gonna be tenants. In the lease agreement, you put down who the tenant is, who the landlord is, the term of the lease, if it's the same, 5 years. When are they taking possession of the property as tenants, and when are they gonna move out? Okay? So technically, what happens is they get the option to purchase on the agreement of sale and the option to rent for 5 years on the lease agreement. Now, you cannot put the deposit in the agreement of sale and in the lease. It only has to go only in one place, because the deposit most of the time is non-refundable. If they didn't execute the option to purchase, it needs to go in the agreement of sale. And then you should put a clause there that if the buyer does not settle on the property, the deposit is going to be forfeited to the seller because of not complying with the contract. Okay? So two documents, agreement of sale, shows purchase price, who the buyer and the seller, and settlement date that has to match with the lease term on the lease agreement, and don't put the same deposit there. Okay? Everything else, and then you can also put, most of the time, the repairs fall on the tenant. So you have to put in the lease agreement that the tenant is responsible for all the repairs on the property. Okay?